Hey guys, we are here with Merrick. He's one of the co-founders of Celo, which works on Celo. I'll let him take it from here.
Thanks, Sanju. Awesome. Well, it's really great to be here. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hopefully, yes. Awesome. Yeah, so as Sanju mentioned, my name is Marek Olszewski, and today we're going to be talking about the future of stablecoins. As Shinju mentioned too, I'm the CTO and co-founder of Celo, one of the companies working on Celo. And if you're new to Celo, it's an exciting week to hear about it. Celo was last week stood up by a community of validators, and the network has been running ever since, in its kind of release candidate form. This week, it performed a governance upgrade, and things are looking good for it to kind of transition to mainnet. And if you haven't heard of kind of the platform itself, it's a platform that makes financial tools accessible for anybody with a mobile phone. And it's a variant of Ethereum, but it's proof of stake based, and it has a built-in stablecoin. And so I've been kind of thinking and looking at stablecoins for the last 3 years. And so this talk is kind of based on some of the interesting findings that we've seen in the past and what we're predicting will happen in the future. So I'm going to make the slides full screen. And yeah. And so before we kind of take a look at the future, I just want to take a quick look at where we've come from. I was reading the Bitcoin white paper for, I don't know, the 10th time the other day. And what struck me recently when I was reading it is just how much emphasis Satoshi puts on payments. And not as much, he had very, very little emphasis on kind of Bitcoin as a store of value, and was really trying to optimize for creating a solution that would work to send payments between people in a fully trustless manner. I think there was a double-digit mentions of the words payment, cash, merchant, and 0 mentions of the word store of value. And so Bitcoin, in its kind of foundation, its roots, really was hoping to be a payment infrastructure. And, there's been a lot of reasons why we haven't been able to get to that. One of those reasons, obviously, early on was the lack of stability. I think if you want to have a currency that's useful as a medium of exchange, I think a lot of people believe that the stable value is important. Luckily, over the course of the last few years, we've made a lot of good progress on that front. And so here's a kind of graph by CoinDesk. I think they sourced this from Coinmetrics, showing just the kind of supply of stablecoins today over the last few months. Perhaps not surprisingly, due to COVID-19, the supply of stablecoins has just swelled dramatically. I think it was around 5 billion at the start of the year, and now it's over 8 billion. And unfortunately, many of these, in fact, all of these, are actually fiat-backed stablecoins. So if you look at this chart again, you'll see that DAI is absent from here. And this is because they chose to list only the top 5 stablecoins by market cap. And so if you wanted to add DAI based on its current 100 million kind of market cap, it would look roughly like this. It's quite frankly, a huge market cap, but it's dwarfed dramatically by the overall kind of supply in the space. That said, DAI and to some extent synthetics have really done really good job giving us a ton of evidence that decentralized stablecoins can actually work. I think for a long time there were a lot of people who didn't believe that something like this would have been possible. And now we have a growing amount of empirical evidence that you can, in fact, build something that remains stable and is truly written entirely in software and doesn't require you to trust anyone, not even kind of a bank that is holding fiat backing your stablecoin. If you look at the price of DAI and this is multi-collateral DAI and SUSD, you'll see that they've done quite a good job of maintaining their peg. Even in March, when we had a lot of volatility in the markets, both of these were able to um, maintain their pegs pretty well. In fact, DAI, even after Black Thursday, perhaps somewhat counterintuitively, was trading above $1. Even though it ended up being insolvent and under collateralized by around 8 million US dollars. And so I think hopefully kind of this growing body of evidence is showing people that um, programmable stablecoins are in fact feasible, and hopefully we can continue iterating on them and get to a point where they can compete more and more with these fiat-backed stablecoins. And so there's a lot of ways that kind of can happen. I think there's a few ideas that have been flowing around in various communities on how to make these things better, how to help them kind of grow. And the first one's around matching supply to demand. I think one of the reasons why that chart is so stark is because the supply of DAI is not tied really to the demand of it. It's tied to the demand of borrowing stable assets with things like Ethereum. In the case of DAI, and in the case of synthetics, it's tied to the kind of demand for staking SNX in order to earn rewards. And so that there's no real direct connection between the demand for DAI or SUSD and the actual supply. And so Robert Sams wrote this pretty interesting paper all the way back in 2014 that came up with a scheme that allows you to kind of elastically expand and contract the supply of your stablecoin to meet that demand. He referred to this as kind of using a seigniorage shares type model. And I think most famously, Basis wanted to use this to create their stablecoin. Celo also uses pieces of seigniorage shares, although unlike Basis, it's actually crypto collateralized, and so in a way, it's also kind of merging what is working well for Maker and some of these ideas that Robert Sams kind of proposed. And so as we see more stablecoins that kind of adopt this design, I think it's going to be a lot easier to compete against these fiat-backed stablecoins and actually create currencies that have the liquidity to meet the kind of growing demand and appetite for stablecoins. Next, one of the things that happened on Black Thursday was due to network congestion, it was hard to participate in the liquidation auctions on the Maker DAO system. There were a number of auctions that were, or a number of vaults that were liquidated for $0 effectively, simply because there was only one bid that was able to actually get their transaction through. And so in a world where these things happen, blockchains are scarce resources, and there will always be times when there will be kind of various degrees of network congestion. I think some people started thinking whether or not auctions are really the right design, or whether or not leveraging automated market makers would make more sense. Obviously, Uniswap has grown tremendously over the past couple of years, and it's great to see their version 2.0 announced. And I saw just a little bit of the last talk that was just shown here. It's really exciting, and I think these Uniswap and other automated market makers can play a really interesting role in the future by allowing people to um, trade volatile assets for stable ones in order to liquidate things like vaults in times of need without having to worry about whether or not there is a lot of participation or not. And so this is actually one of the things that Celo does today. Celo stable currency actually uses a Uniswap-inspired automated market maker that allows you to exchange one Celo dollar for one US dollar worth of Celo gold using kind of a decentralized exchange that doesn't require a counterparty. And then finally, I think wouldn't it be great if when you submit a transaction, you can actually get it mined. I think Vitalik for a while now has been talking about ways that Ethereum can have a better way of auctioning off kind of gas. The first price auction model that's used today has a number of inefficiencies that make it quite volatile in times of congestion. And so he proposed EIP 1559 along with a few other authors. And it's really exciting, and we really see this as the future. Not only does it make your gas estimation a lot easier, it also helps lower kind of the variance of your transaction latencies, which again, in times of need, in times of congestion, I should say, is just hugely helpful for your Oracle updates and also for your auctions and other mechanisms that you have for maintaining stability. And Celo also, I'm excited to say, has implemented this, and it's working on the Celo network today. And so we hope that this will be a good data point for the Ethereum community as well, as they kind of continue to debate the merits of switching to this model. So that's in the immediate future. But is this enough? Is this really enough for kind of Satoshi's vision? Can we, if we make these changes, or even if we use these fiat-backed stablecoins that seem to be everywhere kind of today, can we start using blockchains for kind of broad payments? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. These stablecoins are still used primarily for kind of arbitrage trading and kind of as a safe haven asset. I think obviously they're used for DeFi as well, but if you look at the DeFi kind of pulse market cap, that's around 800 million right now, compared to over 8 billion. It's only 10% that is actually used for DeFi. And so there's still a long way to go to get stablecoins to both be used in DeFi and also just for payments. And so how do we get there? We're here. Satoshi painted this beautiful vision over there. How are we going to get there? And I think the timing couldn't be more critical right now. With COVID-19, the need for electronic payments is just more pressing than ever. I'm sure many of you here have kind of followed the debate that happened in kind of the U.S. Congress when they were debating the stimulus bill. There was concern that the U.S. financial infrastructure wouldn't be able to distribute the federal stimulus to kind of the U.S. population sufficiently quickly to have a meaningful impact. And so they were considering introducing a central bank style digital currency kind of this US digital dollar in order to help get these distributions out to people more quickly. And if the US is talking about this, imagine in countries that have even less financial infrastructure than the US, in places that have less people who are banked, less people who have access to things like PayPal, Venmo, Square Cash. It only becomes more important in these other markets. And the World Bank actually looked at this and gave some recommendations out to a number of different countries. And their suggestion really is to use mobile phones to get these stimulus payments out in the hands of people as quickly as possible, and in a way that is fully contactless. But if you're a country and you're thinking, what infrastructure are we going to do this on if you don't have things like Venmo easily accessible? How do you actually do this? You can risk getting locked into a platform, a proprietary platform, and working with vendors, or you can potentially work on and build on open platforms. And so, but if you're going to do that, how are you actually going to get this in the hands of people in a way that's easy, in a way that's kind of convenient? Luckily, there are two efforts, at least that I can think of, that have really been doing a lot on this front. Argent, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, has just an incredible mobile wallet that makes it really easy to send stable value over the Ethereum network to people using ENS addresses, so you don't have to worry about public key-based addresses. They even support meta transactions, so you can pay for gas in your stable value asset. You don't have to hold ETH, and the experience is really quite great. And then Celo also has a really, I'm obviously biased, but a pretty compelling solution. This is the Celo wallet on the right. You can likewise send stable value really easily. You can send Celo dollars and soon other stable value assets. And you can pay for those transaction fees directly in those stable assets, because on the Celo platform, you can pay for gas using ERC20-like tokens. And then rather than using ENS, Celo has a PKI that maps hashes of phone numbers to wallet addresses and has a decentralized phone verification protocol. And so you can just send payments directly to phone numbers. And critically, you can send those payments to phone numbers of users who haven't yet created public-private key pairs and haven't yet signed up for the platform. And so from the point of kind of stimulus and cash transfers, it's really quite easy to send these payments out. And luckily, when I talk about kind of distributing stablecoins to a large number of people, I think a lot of people ask, well, but how many smartphones are actually out there? Is the infrastructure really ready for this? And the answer is a resounding yes. There are over 8 billion mobile devices, phones that are connected to the internet today that have mobile subscriptions. 6 billion of these are smartphones as of kind of 2020. And the number is only growing. And as you can see here, the connectivity is only getting better and better. But I think, I wanted to share a few additional kind of possible kind of future projections. I think most people here probably believe that at some point in time, mobile payments will run very efficiently on mobile devices and will become ubiquitous. But what else do stablecoins kind of have ahead? There's three, I think, pretty exciting ideas that we spend a lot of time talking about at C Labs. The first is around local and regional currencies. after the last economic kind of crash in 2008, there were a bunch of local economies that were really struggling to make ends meet. The Sardinian economy is one example of this. And someone had a pretty ingenious idea of creating what is called Sardex, which is kind of a local electronic kind of money system that basically allows local businesses in Sardinia to barter with each other without requiring kind of access to fiat and liquidity and just general capital. Likewise, in the UK, there's in kind of the county of or the area of Bristol, there is this thing called the Bristol Pound, which is backed by real pounds, but only accepted in kind of local communities in the Bristol area. And it's also been shown to promote economic growth in kind of the Bristol communities. And there's many examples of this in the US as well. I think Ithaca has one of these. Arizona has something at the state level. And in fact, after the Great Depression, a lot of local economies use these as well. But launching them is difficult, especially if you want to print these in a way that's hard to forge. And so in a world where everyone has a really easy to use mobile wallet that can transact with stablecoins that are fully programmable, it becomes really quite easy to add kind of additional criteria to your programmable currencies that limit you and only let you spend these in local markets and let you kind of promote kind of and support your local communities. And I think just like there'll be stable variants of these, there might even be non-stable variants of these that give you kind of exposure into kind of the economy of your kind of local region. And that's going to be really interesting to see as well. Next up, negative interest. Negative interest has been used now for a while to promote economic growth. I think Sweden most famously was the first country to do it at the country level in 2014. Since then, a number of countries have followed throughout the EU, and I think Japan is a pretty massive market as well that's been doing this for a while. And it's been pretty effective at spurring economic growth, but obviously fairly difficult to implement. And its success actually goes back all the way back to the 20th century, after the Great Depression. In Europe, there were a number of different kind of cities that were experimenting with this. A fairly well-known economist called Silvio Giselle talked about this, and a bunch of mayors decided to try it. One of the most, I would say, exciting examples of this happened in Wargol, where the mayor introduced what's called a script currency. This is a currency that has these kind of spots where you can place stamps, and the note itself is only valid if for every given month you kind of affix one of these stamps onto one of these kind of corresponding spots. And so this is kind of the way that you pay for that negative interest. And again, the note isn't valid unless those stamps are there. And so it really promotes kind of spending. They experimented with having 1% inflation per month, and it ended up being just a massive success. They built a number of roads, they built bridges, people paid back taxes. Suddenly, if the value that you're holding in your bank account or under your mattress is going down over time, you have a pretty strong incentive to pay your taxes quickly rather than delaying that. Of course, it's a little difficult to implement today. since we don't have these script currencies where you kind of affix these notes. In Japan, kind of negative interest has actually resulted in people hoarding cash and buying up safes. And so this is, again, where programmable money can really, really help in a world where cash is replaced by decentralized stablecoins. Suddenly you can do interesting things to spur economic activity simply by programming in this negative interest. So that's going to be really interesting to see going forward. And then finally, there's this one really, really interesting idea by a fairly well-known philosopher named Charles Eisenstein. He wrote a book over 10 years ago now called Sacred Economics, where he wrote about the fact that whatever backs money tends to be valued in the world. So a great example of this is gold. When gold backed money, people went out and found more gold, traded it in for money, and that brought a lot of value to gold. And so given that realization, he proposed this idea of actually backing money by things that you want to see more of in the world. And so things like virgin rainforests, affordable housing, pristine rivers. There's a lot of things that we can probably think of that we would want the world to value more. And using it to back money is one way to get there. And 10 years ago, when you kind of read this, you think about it and you say, it's a really interesting idea, but it's kind of hard to imagine how you could implement that. But today, in a world where you have algorithmic stablecoins that are backed by crypto collateral, and in a world where people are tokenizing everything and anything, it's not that far-fetched to imagine a world where your next stablecoin that you're going to use is an algorithmic stablecoin that is backed by potentially tokenized rainforests. And so it won't be long, hopefully, before you'll be able to make a decision. You'll be able to either use a stablecoin, a fiat-backed stablecoin that's running on a proof-of-work network, maybe contributing towards global warming, or a stablecoin that is backed by trees in part and helping solve global warming. So that's everything I have for you. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. If you're interested in staying in touch, staying connected, definitely check out these two links. And then, yeah, happy to take any questions if we have any time.
Maybe one or two questions? So there are 4 questions in the Ask a Question section.
Got it. Okay. First question: how does Celo make sure that the stablecoin is censorship resilient? That's a great question. So I think, as most kind of decentralized stablecoins that are not fiat backed, I think because of that nature, they become much harder to censor. Celo is backed by other crypto assets, including Bitcoin and Ethereum, which will initially be held in part with an entity that's entrusted through on-chain governance. The long-term plan is to use trustless bridges to bridge these assets onto Celo, so that those assets can be held in the reserve fully programmatically, as well as the other assets that already exist on the Celo chain. And so that is kind of the direction towards complete censorship resistance. Does that answer your question, RV? Next up, should the digital dollar be a stable coin? I would say, by definition, any US digital dollar would be a stable coin. And I think I heard Shinju jump in there, so we might be at time. Or maybe not. So I'll keep going. Are you considering or have you considered a stablecoin not pegged to fiat? Maybe pegged to its own moving average? Yeah, that's a great question, Marco. We have considered it. In fact, similar to synthetics, I think we're very interested in creating stablecoins that are pegged to a number of interesting kind of assets for people to have exposure to, either commodities, maybe other things. But I think we want to launch the network first and prove out the Celo dollar stability first.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the really great talk, Merrick. If you guys want to learn more about Celo, go to their website, celo.org. And we're going to move on to our next session now. Thanks.